I'm Hayes Hartwig. This is Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. Today we have Dims. I'm not going to try to get through your whole name.
Yeah.
I will murder it. So
it's okay.
Don't worry, if everybody who's listening, it will be written down in the comments below so you can find the guy.
That's all good.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what did you do before real estate? Like, how did you get here?
How did I get here? A lot of family pressures, actually. So for the most part, it's because my dad wanted me to get into real estate. So after I graduated, I was sort of like, what do I do? You try a few things out and you're just like, is it for you? And you're just trying to, for me, I was just trying to find my way.
Yeah.
And, it's the way I sort of see it was like I was sort of taking Costco size samples of from a career perspective as to what I like. And then just nothing really stuck. So I tried real estate and then sort of is panning out really well.
That's good.
And it's becoming interesting. But I like bricks and walls and whatnot.
So what were you doing before that? Like what was your job right before real estate?
So before this, I had a little job with the Canada Revenue Agency. I also worked during the Vancouver Olympics.
Okay.
And then I also helped out at BC Ambulance as well. So I just did a few things. But the stuff in the office job sort of thing didn't really flow with me. So then I just decided, okay, let me try something completely different, which is real estate. So I went to go get my trading services license and sort of panned out. Yeah.
Oh, that's good, man. Now you work mostly in presale. You were with that new condos?
Vancouver New Condos.
Vancouver New Condos.
Yeah. So I joined Mike Stewart and Adam Scalina's team, and we've actually grown quite a bit.
Yep.
And it's actually been real estate's a very hot button topic in Vancouver, and especially am I understating it?
Just like
but for the most part, what appealed me to the team was how fast it's growing, but also pre-sales. Like everyone's looking towards pre-sales. Like you can't find anyone who's like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to go to a presentation center. No, people want to go.
Yeah, of course.
People want to explore. People want to view the different offerings.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of them, and I think there's a lot of different options and a lot of different variety out there. So it's all picking like the best flavor.
And for those who are like newer, what exactly is a pre-sale?
Okay, so a pre-sale is basically a sort of fixed contract, if you will. So sort of a futures contract where you go into a presentation center. If you like it, you write up a contract, and then it's pretty much a promise to purchase into the future. That's basically what it is. There's a lot of details other than that, but that's
overview here.
That's the 20-word sort of thing there.
Yeah.
Very short and dirty sort of thing.
Okay, so for that process, obviously, for a high overview, we can't get right into the grit.
Yeah.
What is the process of purchasing a pre-sale? Like, I walk into the place, and I'll just get keys, right? So what's the score?
Okay. So good question. The thing with pre-sales is that you can be super detailed or it can be super easy. So generally, the way people think about it, we'll just do a high overview.
Yeah.
Is you see a billboard, Hayes is building in downtown, and then you walk in the presentation center, and then there's usually some sort of show home, some sort of model that you can look at, and some sort of color palettes that you can generally choose from. If you like all of that, you get a contract written up, and then you'll also get a disclosure statement if you're in British Columbia or even Alberta.
Okay.
And it's basically a huge 300-page disclosure statement. Their thing. No one likes to read them, but anyway, you get that sort of material, And then what happens is you have 7 days to decide whether you want it or not. It's known as a cooling off period.
Yeah, much like the one that they brought in for regular.
Yeah. Pretty much the same.
Okay.
And then what happens is usually, if you're in Vancouver, this pre-sale will be a big pile of dirt somewhere.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be constructed. It's just a pre-sale. It's used for financing from the developer's perspective. And then you wait 4 years, usually 4 or 5 years. Hopefully there's no delay for it to be built. Once the building is about 98, 99% complete, you get the opportunity to go in there and do a walkthrough inspection.
Okay.
Once you do the walkthrough inspection, you can check off whether things look good or not. And if something's not right, you can get the developer to correct those things. And then after that, usually about a month later, you get keys, and then that's the process. You get to move in right away. Yeah.
Now, typically, of course, a high rise will take longer to build than a low rise.
Yes.
Are there any rules of thumb, give or take, for like a low rise compared to a high rise? One will take X years, one of the, obviously not hard and fast, but around-ish.
So usually wood frames take, let's call it around 3.5 years.
Okay.
And let's just say concrete structures take usually about 4 to 4.5 years. But it's a very rough guideline. So for example, if you have to build out land, so an example of that would be in New West, there's Pier West. If you have to build out land
into the freezer
where you are, which you're super familiar with, if you have to build that out, that's going to take even more time because and it's mainly because of licensing. So you have to get DFO on board, you gotta get the city of New West on board, you just have to get the provincial government, I'm sure, has to get involved. I'm sure there are multiple parties out there that have to go like, okay, we approve. So it depends how complex the project is. So the more complicated, the more likelihood there is of a delay.
So generally 3.5 to
3.5
for the low rise, 5-ish for high rise, barring any craziness. So when buyers are thinking about going the route of pre-sale, what are some of the things that they should think about before signing on the
list? So we get a lot of people that think that the first step is to find a pre-sale that you like. But I think that's maybe not the right way of going about it. I think the right way of going about it is to check up on financing first. Because it's sort of like going to the grocery store. If you didn't have your wallet, how much could you really afford? You don't really know whether it's going to be, whether you're going to be spending $10 at the grocery store, or whether it's going to be like, I don't know, $1,000,
Costco,
or whatever. Costco, So you don't really know where that is. But it's, but if you translate that to real estate, I mean, we can show you things that are 300,000, but we can also show you things that are 26 million. So, okay, where do you want to end up? Right. So I think it's important to do financing first. Once you have that secured, then look at location. Where do you want to live? Because location is something that we can't really change. We can change, we can rip out a kitchen, worst case. Let's just say you move in and you hate the kitchen. Okay, rip it out. It'll cost you a lot of money. Not advised, but you could, right? But location is something that we can't pick up and move. So I'd say find a location, then look at developers that are in that region, and then go to those show homes. So, or go on our website as well. And then, in terms of location, you're able to find, we have a little like a map overlay with all the pre-sale projects on our website. You just go to one of those. We're not the only ones out there. There's tons of other ones, but you can do that as well. And that gives you a rough idea just to become familiar with everything. But financing, location, then do the hunt.
With the financing though, on the low end, it's 3.5 years out. Is it better to deal? I noticed that a lot of the pre-sale sites have pre-locked financing, but they're usually higher than what it currently is being available, sort of thing. Is it better to go with the one just at the site, or is there a way to talk to a mortgage broker or whomever to lock that in, or what's the best way to handle that?
Really good question. So I always say just go talk to a mortgage broker just to see where the numbers end up. Yes, the interest rate will not be the same. It won't be desirable, but you should still just see where the numbers end up so that you know where your trajectory is, right? If the mortgage broker says, hey, you can borrow like $300,000, that's it. Okay, well, you know where you'll end up in Vancouver.
Yeah, not in Vancouver.
Yeah, not in Vancouver. not especially not in downtown. Yeah. But if they say like, hey, you can borrow up to $1 million. Okay, now those options sort of open up, and if you're looking for a 1-bedroom in downtown, well, those usually trade at $1 million, to at least $1 million. Yeah. So at least it gives you some sort of guideline. But to answer your question specifically, when we're talking about just pre-approvals and whatnot, usually when there is a pre-sale contract in play, you can reach out to one of the larger banks, and the larger banks have like a pre-sale program where they will secure your financing, usually not at great interest rates, but what they'll do is they'll pull all your credit, and then they'll pull all your credit, all those documents, all the income documents and tax documents, and then what happens is if you're approved, great. They'll say, oh, we can finance you for, I don't know, 500,000 or whatever. Yeah. And then at least the gap, and you can see whether, that fits. Let's just say you make like $50,000, $60,000 a year. You can see, okay, will I be able to make the purchase price? Can I actually afford it? Or can you not afford it? Yeah. So at least it gives you a rough idea as, can I buy this thing at the end of the day, when it completes.
Yeah. And then I guess also with that, with the rate that they've given you, if there's a lower one at the time, take it.
Then you can take it. Yeah. So you can get reevaluated at the time. But the really good thing about these pre-sale programs, and I just did one myself, just underwent one myself, is they won't review your income on completion. So let's just say you lose your job in, I don't know, 2030 when the building's complete, they will still forward you the money.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's super valuable. It gives you some sort of security, at least, that you will get that product at the end. You will get that financing. Yeah. Yeah. So all of this is about doing your homework in advance. None of it, I'd say, is rocket science, but it is something that you need to know, because what you don't want happening is you hand the developer, all your life, your life earnings, your $200,000, $300,000, only to walk away from the deal. I think that is way worse.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
Yeah. You don't want to do that.
Right?
Yeah. It's a boatload of money. I don't make that amount, but it's not chump change to me. But that's the best way I find to make sure that you get your product at the end of the day, and it's the best way to make sure that you have your ducks in a row.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, with that, people going into the sales center and all that, are there any pitfalls they should watch out for in particular? Like ones that just sort of, for the run of the mill sort of come up just to keep an eye on something, or check for this or that in particular?
Yes. Okay. So when you're at the presentation center, and I go through a lot of presentation centers.
Yeah. A lot of donuts,
a lot of bottled water, and a lot of but when you're at the presentation center, you'll be looking at the model, and it'll look amazing. It'll be a 60-story structure. You might have a little bit of the river or whatnot, in the case of Pier West.
But, and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. But what you want to know and what you want to do is eventually you want to leave that presentation center and then go look at the actual site.
Okay.
Because sometimes what happens is that model is only so big. What's going on around it? Sometimes they'll just fill it with green space. I was at a presentation center yesterday, and there's a single family lot off to the left of the site. Yeah. But the house is not there. It's just green. It's just a patch of green. Well, that might be material for you if you're there. Like maybe that house can be zoned for, I don't know, 100 stories or whatever. Yeah. That's important for you to know. So it's important to go to the site after and say, and just imagine what's going on around it, because you don't want it to be built and then you move in 4 years later and you're like, oh, I didn't check out that property and that adjacent property. There was a redevelopment sign that I didn't pay attention to at one point in time. So that's important, I think. Another thing that's also important is I think a lot of people put too much weight on the display homes. Mm-hmm. So when you go through the display home, it looks immaculate. Yeah. And that's really good. That's what a developer is supposed to do. It should look immaculate. Yeah. But one thing you also have to remember is the person constructing the display home is not the same person building the building.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is fair, right?
Yeah, fair enough,
that's completely fair. A lot of people get drawn into you go into the closet. There's 2 sets of shoes. 3 pairs of jeans and 2 shirts.
No one lives this way.
and maybe one luxury handbag somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's, but people get drawn into because that's the way they want to live.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, does anyone live like that? No. Like realistically, it's 100 pairs of shirts just crammed in there.
Yeah. Absolutely, right?
yeah, just stuffed to the max. Not color coordinated,
Yeah.
And it's fine, that's their job, but it is something that you just have to be aware of when you're going through these presentation centers.
Yeah.
And then, just to further your point too, sometimes what will happen is you go in there and then maybe they have a 2-bed, 2-bath on display, but you're buying a studio and the appliance package is different. It's going to be smaller. The one for the 2-bed, maybe like a 36-inch, whatever.
Yeah.
But then the studio is going to be like a 24-inch or some sort of compact one.
Yeah.
So you just have to be aware of the differences that you're going to get, and just be aware. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's actually a good segue because I was going to ask what happens if the product is different than the one shown in the show suite. Like, I know for sure a building to remain unnamed in Burnaby, they're supposed to have these ingress heaters and all this stuff, and they sure as hell are not.
Yeah.
So, is there? I know that there's a little bit of some flex if the size a couple feet off here and there, and there's a methodology to that.
Yeah.
But what happens if it's way off? I mean, we've heard some horror stories where developer starts to run out of money, and so now all of a sudden the quartz countertops are arborite, and just stuff like this, right?
Yeah.
What happens?
Okay. So, the short answer is that there's not a lot of recourse in terms of, for example, the heaters, because a heater is a heater at the end of the day. But of course, when you looked at the renderings, it was like recessed. It was really nice,
pretty bomb looking.
Yeah. But of course, one of the conditions inside the 20-page contract that you'd be getting is it says don't rely on the show home, which is a little
loose,
and I wouldn't. You just got to be careful, right? So pre-sales are good in terms of like if you want new product, but I think people put too much weight onto that didn't look like the show home. So I think it's important that when you're buying pre-sale, just go into it understanding that it should reasonably look like that, but it may not be that to the T. And I think people are putting way too much weight on it should be like that to the T. We're not building, I don't represent a developer, but at the end of the day, like one thing to note is that they're going to generally try and keep the same sort of vibe, like everything sort of
roughly the same color scheme and that sort of thing.
Yeah. But they're not going to go out and swap out like I don't know something, go super budget or something like that. They're going to try and keep the same quality. But I know it's super disappointing. I can understand that. I had a client that purchased in there, wasn't too happy that it didn't look the same, and I get it. I really do get it.
So now with that, I mean, what are some of the benefits of pre-sale versus resale? That A and B. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. I know that Mike's listening. So
no, it's okay. But pre-sale is really good if you have the funds and you like new and you want the location. Because I find that a lot of pre-sales, they have sought after locations. Let's just say you want to be at the mall. In the mall. You don't want to be a block away. You want to be at the epicenter. They're really good.
Okay.
You can't get better than that. But then when you look at resale, for example, one of the benefits there is that you get to see what it is today. There's no dream. We're not going to show you, beautiful gardens and whatnot. It's what do you see today? So there's pros and cons to both, and it's not always apparent. And in some cases too, it's not always just what you see, but it's also dates. So a lot of first-time home buyers, they don't quite have the payments today, right? They don't have the money today, but they know they'll have the money tomorrow. And they need a payment plan, if you will. So that's where it starts making sense. So it really it's about looking at your needs and seeing what makes sense for you.
Yes, absolutely. So now we were talking about going into the sales centers and all that stuff. A person can just walk into a sales center and make that purchase.
Absolutely.
Is that a good idea? And how does using a realtor help for that sort of thing?
I say you want to use a realtor if you're not familiar with the landscape. I know a lot of people that just go in there first time looking at a show home, and then that's it. They're good to go. They're sold. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. And I'm not saying that you have to use a realtor. You definitely don't have to, but it just makes the process a lot easier. I'd relate it to almost like if I showed you how to change your brake pads 10 times, you'd know exactly what to do probably by the 10th time. Mm-hmm. Same thing with real estate. You should probably see what happens so that you're not surprised at the end of it.
Fair
so
enough.
Whether you use a mechanic, in the analogy, or whether you do it yourself, it depends on your experience and what you know. If you've done like 10, I'd say if you've done in general, I'd say 5 or 10 transactions, real estate transactions, and you've witnessed them the whole way through, then you know what to expect. So you might not need a realtor at that point. But if you're brand new and you're a first-time home buyer, it might make more sense if you're not familiar with it. So it depends where you're coming from. And it's important that someone reads a disclosure statement. If this is like the first time that you're purchasing pre-sale, you look at that 300-page disclosure statement and you're just like, no way, like, why would I read this? You have 7 days, but why would you read this?
It's dry as hell, right?
It's super dry. But the thing is, like, there's material information in that. And oftentimes, if there's other clauses that may not be favorable for the consumer, it'll be in that disclosure statement. It's not going to be in the contract. I'm sorry. I didn't write it, but that's where I find where all the dirty laundry gets aired out. It's hidden in there. So it's important to read it. And, at the end of the day, it's a legal document. So it is kind of binding. And at the same time, what's also important too is a lot of people don't look at the strata plan. It's important to look at the strata plan sometimes because in the case of some buildings, you flip through the strata plan and you're like, oh my God, there's like 9 levels of parking and you're buying a 1-bed. Most likely you will be, say if you're lucky enough to get the starting price 1-bed, great. But that also means your parking stall, if you're allocated one, is going to be in P9. It's not going to be in P1. So you might want to look at, how many minutes you're going to be spending in the parking lot going circles. Driving around in circles.
Like NASCAR.
So it's all material stuff, right? But and I'm not saying anything that's rocket science, but I am saying like it's just stuff that you got to be aware of. This is all just being aware of. And if you've practiced it enough, it's just like soccer. If you've practiced it enough, it's easy. But if it's your second time on the pitch, you're just going to look lost. That's all it is. Yeah.
So with the disclosure statements, though, if you do find something that's unfavorable and you don't like during that 7 days, I mean, obviously you can just walk, but do some developers allow for things to be crossed off or changed or amended or anything like that? Or is it just, here it is, take it or leave it?
It's pretty much here it is, take it or leave it. So, but I think that's where you have to have an honest conversation with whoever the stakeholders are. So whether it be, let's just say if you're on the younger side with your parents who might be helping you with the down payment, with your realtor, whomever, your lawyer or whatever, just to see whether, there should be a concern. Is it a reasonable concern? Like one of the things on the first few pages of the disclosure statement is has the developer been previously bankrupt before? That could be a material fact, or maybe you don't care because they got financing and they've secured it. So who knows, right? Like there's 300 pages that we could critique, right? So absolutely. so it really depends at the end of the day.
So now with buyers looking at different pre-sales, how can they ensure that or at least have a better shot to make sure that they're getting a good deal? And what are some of the decision factors? You touched on location before, but why choose building A over building B? Like what are some of the main things that someone should be looking for to sort of ensure that they're getting their money's worth?
Worth? Okay. I think the first thing to look at is you really have to look at the floor plan. And I didn't know this when I started real estate, but when I look at a floor plan, I can imagine how to navigate it. Okay. But I also noticed that other people may not have that skill where let's just say you're at IKEA and you can just see whether something fits a space. Some people have that sort of mindset and some people don't. It took me a while to realize. It took me 4 years to realize this. So floor plan is incredibly important, but also what your expected view is. That's why I say go on site and then literally take your floor plan and just like, this is the, just look at
I get you. This is what I'm looking at
this is what
here.
I'm going to be looking at, right? I think that's incredibly important because it happens so many times where like you do your walkthrough and you're like, that wasn't there before, and I wasn't aware about that one. It's like, yeah, but it's on the floor plan,
Yeah.
So you do have to look towards that. I would also say that when you're comparing different floor plans, different buildings, right?
Yeah.
You want to look at the offering. So maybe sometimes the amenity package.
Okay.
Like, let's just take, I won't name any building names, but if you're in Burnaby, there is a development with all the amenities, like literally everything, like golf simulator, 3 pools, two hot tub saunas, like just everything, and it sounds wicked. Like, I'd love to live in there. But you also have to pay for those amenities as well.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 pools sounds like a lot of strategies in the future.
Definitely. And then there's going to be like there's expected to be some sort of grocery store on the bottom, so it's going to be super convenient. But all of that has a cost. Like, if you have a convenience store or commercial on the bottom, and you're so close to SkyTrain, you might have to hire security. There might be sort of more wear and tear on the building.
Yeah.
So it comes with added costs.
Okay.
Versus, let's just say, a low rise, for example, probably may have a meeting room or a gym, maybe, sometimes, and that has less carrying costs. So it depends. It's not always, it comes back to, what do you need? And likewise, I was speaking to some older clients of mine yesterday, and then they don't want the super high rise. They want low rise because what if there's a fire? They want to be able to get out. They don't want to be on the 60th floor. Yeah. So I think it comes down to like how it fits you. Yeah. But also another thing that I think is increasingly more important for downsizers is finding an accessible unit. So every now and then, if you crack open the floor plans, they'll say that, this floor plan is accessible, meaning that the light switches will be a little bit lower. Maybe the door automatically opens and closes. There will be some features like that.
I saw that in that Burnaby one I was just talking about. I've never seen that before. I was like,
that was wicked. Like,
I had no idea that was a good thing.
Yeah. And they did that for every unit too.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So I thought that was super cool to give you a little remote. So if you're carrying your like groceries, just remote and door opens, which I thought was wicked, right? So I think actually in that development, I was like, okay, I think it's balanced. It's not cool that they didn't have the recessed heating, but at the same time, you're getting a few other things that I'm like, this should be okay. Yeah. That you don't really see nowadays. So I'd say for that development, it's fine. But
unnamed development.
Unnamed development. Yeah. We don't know. So it really depends, But it's important to. But I really do think that it comes down to location for how it is to you. I really do think that's important. Some people want to be in the epicenter. If you're younger, you want to be in the middle of all the action. And then when you're a little older, I'm getting to that age where I'm like, maybe the epicenter is not where I want to be. That's the most amount of traffic. Maybe just outside of the boundary, right?
I get my fill of the club days, man. I'm done.
Yeah. So it depends. And maybe you don't like the noise. Maybe you don't like the hustle and bustle. Maybe you want something slower pace because, it can take a while. Like, for example, to get from Willingdon and Lougheed, if you want to be where that Whole Foods is, it takes like 10 minutes to go from Gilmore. It takes a while to get in there. Maybe something on Gilmore or Hold'em or something like that might make more sense for your lifestyle.
Adjacent.
Exactly. That's where I'm at in life, but it doesn't mean that's where everyone else is in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned before in the disclosure that it mentions if a developer has gone bankrupt before and all that.
Yeah.
How important is it for a buyer to research the developer, and where are some good places to find out that information, just to make sure you're not getting a fly-by-night garbage building and buying a lemon for $600,000.
Absolutely. Well, what I'll say is it's tough to really judge something from the future. I will admit it's a bit of a bet. And the reason why is because sometimes you will have a developer that is just financing everything. They just bring the cash.
Yeah.
And then they're just hiring a construction firm to do it. And maybe this happened in a development in South Surrey where they weren't too happy with the construction team. The developer brought the cash, but was not happy with the construction fee.
Yeah.
So they switched it over for the last phase. And, these sorts of things happen from time to time. So you can't always research the developer and say, oh, what's going on with them.
Yeah.
I'd say you should be asking about the construction team.
Okay.
But if you did want to do research on the developer, I don't blame anyone for doing that. And you can do that on our website, actually. We actually have information about that stuff, and we list out the developer. But I'd say asking who the construction company is, I'd say looking at the finishings is also important, and the way the building is structured. So meaning that, hate to say it, but when you're building these fancy buildings, like, carved off to the side and whatnot, it's an engineering feat, but it also means things could go wrong as well. There's more things to go wrong, right? Exponentially. So it's actually technically better if it's just a square box.
Even though it's kind of boring.
Even though it's pretty boring, right? So it's entirely up to the purchaser. But for me, if I were buying it, I'd sort of want the boring building.
Okay.
Just because there's less things to go wrong.
Yeah.
And there are some developers that just literally copy paste their development. Which could be a good thing, meaning that they have their process dialed in, or it could be a bad thing where it's like the same old thing again.
Yeah.
So, so it depends what you're comfortable with at the end of the day.
Yeah. And speaking of comfort, what are some red flags that a buyer should look for? Like, if you see this, it's a immediate, I'm out. or are there any of it? But are there anything that sticks out that if you see this, it'd probably be a good chance to just pull the plug now, don't mess around?
I would say the number one thing for the red flag is actually more on financing. If you can't afford it, do not buy it. That's what I tell all my clients. Do not buy it if you cannot afford it. It's just not worth it. I don't want anyone losing their deposit. But I know you're talking with regards to the project. So with regards to the project, I would say just make sure that they have a bit of a history of buildings. And I would also say, there was a unnamed building out in Surrey, and they're building four towers in that area. And they're currently selling tower number 3. And the thing is, why don't you go, there's open houses in the first 2 towers. Go check those out. See if you like the quality, right? There's Saturday, Sunday open houses. Just go in there. And they recently completed on the 2nd tower, so you can go see their latest work. And if you're not happy with what's there, don't buy tower 3. It's not going to get any better, right?
Same thing. Right?
Same thing. Yeah. And the other cool thing too is that, especially with these multi-phase sort of projects, if you're buying building 3. You can ask your realtor to pull building 1's minutes. Why not read them too?
I guess the same materials, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically, same problems. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Were there lessons learned? And then usually by then there will be some sort of engineer report as well. Okay. So I'd read the engineering report, and let's just say if there is an issue with the engineer report, did they address it for building 3? These are really good questions. But it also, the other reason why I'm saying to do this sort of homework is that maybe building 1 has no issues, and maybe that's a better deal because it's older. Maybe, right? Who knows what the value is? I mean, in today's dollar, if we were to take a snapshot today, I'd probably go for building 1 in this particular development. Just because you can see everything. But that's not to discount building 3 or whatnot.
When there's groups of buildings being built, is it good to get in first? For instance, over at Fraser Mills. There's supposed to be, 16 buildings or something like that. Crazy amount of buildings. It's like a new city, basically.
Yes.
Is it better to get in early?
Yes.
Or should you wait until building 3?
For me, I like to get in the building 2-ish. That one's sold out already in this particular case. And they're selling building number 3. But in general, earlier is the better. And the other thing that sort of motivates you for buying in early is that if you're one of the earlier purchasers, just remember, it's in the developer's best interest to hike up, the prices over time.
So this one, building 2 be more, building 3.
Exactly, right? So and they're going to pace it out until the market catches up too, right? So let's just say there's a huge dip in the market. They're going to wait, before they start selling because they want to see prices climb. That makes sense. Right? So it creates a pretty good story.
So now there's been some changes with the financing. They're now offering the 30-year mortgages for the first-time buyers and new builds.
Yes.
what are your thoughts? Are these going to help? I mean, most places I find are looking for 20% deposit anyways, which means the 30-year was already there. So who cares?
Yeah.
Or like, are there any buildings that are taking less than 20%?
No. It's a pretty tough question to answer, but I think it will help a little bit. It'll help the people that are really stretched, to be able to secure a place. But I also think that if you do your homework, there's a lot of developers out there that are willing to play around with the deposits. Like I was at a development yesterday on the west side. They're willing to take 5% deposits. Okay. I think that's a fantastic deal to be on the west side. I think what a lot of people miss, and this is important for your listeners, is that you want to be able to, hone in on that location, like we mentioned earlier. But I think it's also important to just spend maybe a day or two looking outside of that location, because people often assume like Vancouver's unaffordable. I can't buy anything there. And it's like, have you checked this out? Have you checked that out? Because maybe, you get a better location, but you have to give up 100 square feet or something like that. Something of the sort. And maybe you're willing to do that because you'll be by the seawall or something like that. Okay. So I think people get super hyper focused and then they start missing the point. So I'll give you an example of a debate that I sort of had with one of my clients. You can buy a Surrey presale for call it about $10.50 a foot, or you can buy something in Chinatown or potentially Olympic Village for roughly around the same price per square foot. So it might make more sense. Where do you want to invest your money? And that, that's up to the purchaser to decide. But I find people go into these little funnels and then they just hyper focus on this location rather than like look around a little bit throughout the city. Sense. Yeah.
So now pre-sales are generally pretty expensive.
Yes.
Are first-time buyers actually buying these, or is it more investors like who's buying these?
So what I'm hearing, through the grapevine, is that there's a lot of investors buying it and a lot of first-time home buyers buying it. So I think it's a steady mix. I think it's always been quite a steady mix of first-time home buyers and investors, primarily scooping up the affordable segment. What I've also been hearing out at South Vancouver is that where they're releasing some pre-sales is that there are some parents that have maybe the 2 kids or early teens or whatnot that might want to go to UBC or something like that. And they're concerned about being able to buy a place for their kids. So they're buying pre-sales just because they have the cash now, and they're worried that prices will go up. So that was another interesting thing that I heard from a presentation center where parents are buying it just so that they know they can secure something for their kid into the future. So that's a new segment. It's like a first-time home buyer. Right? Yeah.
Wow,
which is wild. When I heard that, I was like, it makes sense, but that's crazy. Yeah.
So with the first-time buyers that you do deal with,
yes,
have they explained how they got the down payment or how they're working on it? Like, because it's tough to say, like, coming with the investor rental side, rents are really expensive.
Yeah, so really expensive.
They can pay the mortgage. They just can't save for the down payment because it's always going to rent. Yeah. So has any of them sort of tipped their hand and shown you how did they get that extra cash for that down payment when they're paying astronomical for rent?
I'm glad you asked that question. I actually had a client that was exactly in that situation, and the short answer is if you have access to the bank of mom and dad.
I've heard a lot.
Yeah. They pay really, really well. If you have access, if you're an honorary member, they will pay.
Yeah.
And that's actually where a lot of this money is coming from. It's multi-generational wealth. It's parents, it's whatever, but it's not coming from, let's just say, working income. It's coming from other people, most likely your parents or your grandparents. And that's really the short answer. That's actually, that's the answer.
It's funny. Actually, I talk with a lot of my first-time buyers and just tell them, just get into that market.
Just get in the market.
Because of the generational wealth.
Yes.
Like, we can save money, but your place is going to go up $100,000, and most of us can't save $100,000.
You can't. You can't, especially not after tax, right? Because then you actually have to make 130 in order to save 100, right?
Exactly.
And it's just wild. But I would also say to a lot of people out there, at the end of the day, if you know you're going to be in Vancouver and you need a place to stay. Like you just functionally, you don't be on the streets. You need, a box somewhere.
Yeah.
So whether you buy it today or tomorrow, I mean, what's really the risk? Like, what's the big deal? Like, I think right now the market's a little slow, and it's a great time to buy. You want to be at the presentation centers because a lot of developers are thinking like, I haven't had a deal. Like, what's going on? No one out there, but there's actually tons of people out there. There's actually a ton of shoppers out there. Like, we see it on our site all the time. We see the traction.
Yeah.
So there's people out there. And I think now is a better time to buy rather than you going through like 2018. You have to line up to get a unit.
Yeah.
And hopefully you get one unit and you're just praying that you get it. And it's just a wild rush. So I think in these moments, it's better to be shopping right now. You don't have to buy anything, but I think it's important just to shop.
Yeah.
But I do think right now is a good, very, very good time to shop. I don't think it's healthy when there's like 300 people under a tent trying to buy a pre-sale.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. And there is no way a purchaser is getting a great deal in those circumstances.
Absolutely.
There's just no way, right? It's like a Boxing Day sort of special. It's not going to happen, right?
Are the developers back to offering odd things? Because I worked at Bohem's sales site many years ago, and we were offering a Fiat. This is a weird deal, but okay.
You can get a Porsche in some cases. Really? For another development, unnamed. But
the only one that's offered a
Porsche. But I think who cares about the Fiat? Who cares about? I even heard a Tesla Model 3 at one point. Yeah. Who cares about that stuff? Take it off of the purchase price. That is more important. If you can negotiate it, if the developer is willing to talk about that. You don't need the bells and whistles. No. I don't think personally. It is a nice gimmick, but I think it's much more attractive bringing down, your loan amount, because when you do like 3 or 5% right now, and how much interest that is, just give me the credit.
Yeah,
that's what I would do. But you don't have to do that, right? And I'd also go in far to say, like, there was another developer in North Van where they were doing a lot of upgrades, which is really, really nice. But I think in this market, if they came out, they wouldn't do the upgrades. I'd just say, hey, I just want a deduction instead. It's just so much easier for me. And I mean, things change all the time. I mean, now we're into smart homes and having smart thermostats and whatever, but you can change that stuff really easily. Like, if you know how to do it, or you can, if you don't know how to do it, you can hire someone to do it. And it's relatively affordable, it's not going to be a huge thing. And you can even go at your own pace with technology the way it is and things changing every day. You might be able to get something better or whatnot, if you wait 3 years or something like that. Like smart blinds, for example. I love those roller blinds, but they're really expensive. But they're coming down a little bit in price. So things like that, you can do incremental renovations over time, is what I would say. Yeah.
Now, we had been talking earlier in the show about the financing and that. Yeah. I know that back in Toronto, for instance, the rates across Canada obviously went up.
Yeah.
But we keep on hearing these stories about a lot of people in the Toronto area that had kind of got caught with their hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah.
Is that happening out here a lot? Are we seeing a lot of people who have purchased pre-sale, 4 years ago thinking, it's 3% or something, and now they get smashed with 7%?
Yes.
Is this happening? Are people trying to offload that? Are they taking losses? Or is it not as bad? We mostly hear about Toronto because, they're the center of the universe.
Yeah.
Forget Vancouver.
Yes.
Are we seeing the same thing out here, or how's that looking?
So based off, I'll tell you from my clients and my experience.
Yeah.
A lot of it was they can complete. They just don't want to. It's not ideal.
Yeah.
They still complete. People still whine. People still complain. But it goes back to, what is a pre-sale? A pre-sale is sort of a futures contract. It's a fixed price securing that unit. So you have to go into it expecting that. But also, there's opportunity where, okay, maybe you secure something at $300,000 like you would back in the day, and then now it's like suddenly worth $500,000.
Yeah. So there's that lift.
Right? But at the same time, like right now in Brentwood, pre-sales, say if you wanted to buy a one bed, $600,000 30 square feet, it's like $800,000. So I think the question is, do you foresee that going to $1 million? And I struggle with that. Yeah, it's like, that's a little ambitious, you know. That's a tall order. So I think you just have to watch out with that. But you just have to understand that's the dynamics. That's how a pre-sale works. So if you go into it understanding that, then you won't. You may still get your hand caught in the cookie jar, but at least you'll be able to complete. And that goes back to why you need to do financing first, to make sure that checks out and to make sure that you get those funds. Because at least when you know, okay, at least one of the big banks will give me $500,000 for my $800,000 purchase. So all I have to do is make up that $300,000, that difference. At least you know that. Yeah. You know, and most people, I think most people, even if there's a little bit of a loss initially, they'll just live in it or whatever, wait for the market to go up, and then ta-da, right? So,
which is actually a nice segue there. Yeah. There's the new anti-flipping taxes.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
Which, do you want to update our listeners on what that is?
So there's the federal flipping tax, and then there's also the provincial flipping tax. The federal one, you got to keep it at least a year, otherwise they charge you business income on the gain. For the provincial one, you got to keep it for at least 2 years. If you keep it for 1 year, there's sort of like a sliding scale down to zero from 20. I think it's 20% all the way down to zero or something like that. So you just want to make sure you keep the home for at least that amount of time. But of course, what I always struggle with as well is that, yes, it's a big deal that these things come out, but usually when people are buying and selling, especially my clients, there's usually a good reason why they're doing it. So one of the main reasons, at least for my clients, is that they're having a kid. And that's one of the exceptions to the rule. If you have a kid and you're expanding your family, the one bed at 434 square feet probably doesn't work. So you do need to expand, and there is an exception for that as well. There's also, I think, a death or whatnot. There's a few exceptions there that make sense.
Now, have your clients had to adjust to that? Because I'm sure that some don't have that exception. What are they doing? Are they just taking it on the chin? Are they renting it? What's their...
Generally, they're just holding on. It just makes more sense. And there's one thing that people often forget too is that there's a lot of transaction fees. There's realtor fees, there's legal fees, there's accounting fees. There's a lot that goes into it. You don't just trade it for free.
Absolutely.
so it's not just done. So most people would rather wait a little bit. But right now, I think at the same time, listings are growing as well. I think people are trying to make moves right now, regardless of what happens, just because the family composition has changed as well. Maybe you have kids that move out or whatnot, and you have a 3,000 or 5,000 square foot home that's pretty empty. So you're willing to make moves. I think that's perfectly normal in this market.
That makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now, these laws are obviously aimed more towards assignments. Maybe if you just want to explain to our listeners what exactly a high overview of what an assignment is.
What an assignment is. Okay, so an assignment of contract is basically when a purchaser buys a presale, sign the contract, and then before completion, before they take delivery of the keys, they want to sell that contract. So you're literally selling that contract. There are actually I should talk about some advantages and disadvantages as well. So the advantage is there could be opportunity to make money. At the same time, there's an opportunity to lose money as well if you can't complete on it.
So you don't these taxes get you.
Exactly. So it's basically a right to purchase the contract. But what's important is that you have to get developer permission to do so, and some developers charge you if you sell your contract. So it's important to know that. I've seen as high as I think one of them was 11% was the developer fee. Which is a lot of money, right? So you really have to do the math, and assignments really only sort of take off when the market is rising. If the market is balanced or falling, sort of like what it is right now, where it's a little like flat, this is not where you sell an assignment. And there's a lot of people that have made money in assignments before, totally fair. You buy your unit at $299 and you sell it at $500,000 and you flip it over a few times. That happened to a unknown development in Strathcona, but anyway, flip it over a few times. So there is an opportunity to make money, but I mean, let's go back to the Brentwood example for pre-sales. If you have let's say you have one bed, $850,000. Do you foresee yourself gaining any money? Like, do you see it going to $1 million? Because that's what you'd have to make, after you pay all your fees and realtors, capital gains, everything. Like you'd have to be out there. You'd have to make that amount of money.
Now, with the assignments as well, I've noticed in a bunch of the disclosures that you have to get the developer's permission.
Permission, yes.
Is that not a little bit loose? I mean, they could just be like, not today.
Yep, yeah. It has happened before. Yeah. And what the developer will also say to you too is if they're holding a lot of units left over, like an unnamed development in the US, they will say no. Because they want to. They don't want to compete with you. So yes, there is the opportunity where they say no, and then you're sort of hooped. Yeah. Which happened to one of my clients. But you have to be aware of that. So I always tell my clients, when you enter into a pre-sale contract, you expect to complete on it. Don't expect to flip on it. Don't count on it. I get you. Yeah. Because you can get in hot water that way. Like, what if you can't finance it? There's just so many other variables. So when you sign that contract, that pre-sale contract, expect to complete on it. Yeah, that's the safest way to approach it. Yeah.
So now with that, are there any new builds that kind of stick out? You're allowed to name names now. You won't get in trouble. Are there ones that you're like, hey, that might be a pretty good deal, or a certain city maybe to aim at? Or are there any like certain ones that you're like, maybe poke around here over there?
Over there.
where it is.
Okay. I'll tell you where to poke around. Yeah. So I'd poke around in Coquitlam, definitely. Okay. Definitely by United Boulevard over there. I think that has a very exciting opportunity.
So that Fraser Mills area.
Yeah. Definitely. I'd actually poke around on the west side as well. I know there might not be a lot of listeners that are like, oh, that west side stuff is so expensive, but you can buy one beds for, we'll call it comparably priced to Brentwood-ish. Okay. And I think that's also really good. There's some good offerings over there. Another place that I would also look at is Mission. I know Mission's far.
Really?
I know Mission's far. I know where it is on a map, but at the same time, it's affordable. So, there's units there that start at $350,000. That's affordable. At least you can buy it. You can pay it off really quickly if you need to. It's along the West Coast Express. It's okay, right? I'm a huge fan. If you're investing, Maple Ridge makes a lot of sense. At least, once again, along the West Coast Express, sort of connects well with Poco and whatnot. Okay. So I think that's exciting. So anything really affordable, we're seeing take off. If you can afford it, like if you really want like the best deal by percentage, then you want to look downtown. But downtown's not for every pocket. Yeah. But if you're like, I want an awesome deal in terms of percentage numbers, downtown is where it's at right now.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising as long as you got the pay to play.
Yeah. So here's my arm and here's my leg. Is there anything else you need?
Wicked.
Yeah. So
for any of our listeners that have made it this far, would you have any general advice for anyone planning to purchase a presale? Like what are your maybe top 3 tips?
Top three tips.
Or top whatever. Just some tips for that. Some tips. Planning to buy a pre-sale.
What should they do?
Good ideas.
Okay. I'd say there's a lot of pre-sales out there. And if you're sitting from the developer's perspective, you have these marketing budgets, but you know what? You can't reach everyone. Yeah. So do your homework. Either talk to a realtor, go on our website, whatever it is, just to be aware of what's going on in the market. And there's a lot of information out there.
Absolutely.
But a lot of it is like, it's sort of, a bit of a challenge to get to, meaning that the preview kits aren't just like right there. So you will have to approach someone at some point. Yeah. And that's a lot of work. Like if I was, sitting in an office, I wouldn't really want to do that work. So either do it yourself or reach out to a realtor that can sort of just send it out to you right away. Okay. So that's one thing I'd say. Just watch that location. It's so important.
Yeah.
Like Fraser Mills, like it's an awesome location. So, but no one would know if you didn't know, right?
Yeah.
Like you'll be driving to IKEA and you still won't even see like the sign or whatnot, right? Like, so that's why I say it's important to just like look at all the data. But I also think what's really important, and people will hate this, is you got to read that disclosure statement.
Yeah.
Either have someone else do it or read it yourself and actually understand it. Don't just like skim it. Like I actually read them. So I actually can compare and contrast all the disclosure statements, which is, I think, valuable. But I get that it's not for everyone who wants to read, one 350-page disclosure statement and then another one to compare and contrast. Like I get it. Like that's not a fun task to do. Pretty boring. Pretty boring reading the modification of the bylaws section. Pretty boring reading the budget as well. Because even if you look at it, it's like, what does this all mean, right?
Yeah.
Where are the pitfalls? It won't be apparent to the average person, but it is important to at least read that and really take that in.
Okay.
And then I'd say the last thing would be just when you go through the presentation center, just really absorb it, take whatever photos you want. I'm sure they'll let you, but also go to the site and just
go
really
to the site.
Just go on site and just look around. Does this make sense for you? Is it in a good traffic location? Is there lots of parking? Can your friends pass by? Is the SkyTrain nearby? Is it going to be built? I think those are really important things to look at.
Yeah.
And then actually the last thing that I think is also really important is unnamed developer. And actually, if any of your listeners want to know who the unnamed developers are, they can contact us and we'll be more than happy to tell them. But I also think looking at the construction, I know there's not a lot of people in construction, but looking at how they do soundproofing is really important, just because sometimes with wood frame, you can hear your neighbor upstairs if they have heavy feet, and just looking at how they're doing the sound dampening, because right now they'll do like an air gap, which is, I think, really important, but they got to do it both laterally and horizontally as well. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So if anyone's trying to get a hold of you,
all right,
we'll have your information in the description below. But how do they find you?
Well, you can find me on VancouverNewCondos.com, but you can also reach out to any of our team members. We're all more than happy to help. Okay. And we're a pretty big team. So even if you, let's just say you're not just super focused, even though we're Vancouver New Condos, if you want to buy a Kamloops New Condo or a Victoria New Condo, you can reach out to any one of us. We'll connect you. Okay. We'll make it happen. Yeah. We want to find the right home for your listeners out there. So
awesome.
That's the idea. Yeah.
All right. Well, if you made it this far, thank you very much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Please be sure to like and follow us. This has been Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast.